Alright, folks, we are back again. Up next is A Case of Distrust, presented by Ben Wander, apparently. Whoever that is. This, I don't know. Very monotone looking in colors. We'll see what's up. Detective game, maybe? The music and the outline there. So, there's no settings for sound. Cool. I awoke in my desk chair. Across from me were his piercing amber eyes. They surprised me at first, but I should have known he'd be there. I stretched and said mid-yawn, not very nice to sneak into a sleeping woman's apartment, but his stare just continued. I laughed at his glare. I'd seen San Francisco's shrewd thugs, hardened cops, and deadly politicians, but none could ever match that gaze. I knew I didn't have what he wanted. Reaching into my coat, I took out my knife and flicked it open. What the fuck? I held the knife steady while staring back at him. Look, I said, nodding towards the desk. That's all there is. Take it or leave it. But a detective knows when she's beat, and I knew then he wanted to search the place, and that's what he would do. I sighed, knowing my weakness for his type. All right, I said, let's look. He let out a gleeful meow in victory. I cut a piece of my apple that the cat had rejected. Always the sore winner. I jabbed, but I was smiling too because I was telling the truth. There was absolutely no other food in my apartment. The cat often dropped by to scavenge. He made a lot of noise when he thought I was holding out on him, but right now the place was clean and empty, no food anywhere. I had to prove it to him. Taking copies of old murder cases from the... Jesus Christ, this is going to be a shitload of reading. Oh, man. This is like Backbone, except not as slickly packaged. Lamp belonged to my uncle. This is not my thing. I'm just telling you right now. Still preferred to roll her own cigarettes. All right. Kitty cat. Cat had waltzed into my apartment a few years earlier. He kept coming back, though rarely a morsel to eat. Doesn't matter how doe-eyed you are, cutie pie. We've got no food around. He licked his chops and looked at me. Apparently he still didn't believe that. I needed to contradict him somehow, to show him something in the apartment that would prove it was empty of food. Gosh. We are literally trying to reason with a cat. All right. I had to contradict the cat by first talking to him, then pointing to a piece of evidence in my notebook that proved the apartment was empty. Paper stack, desk lamp, ashtray. Used to contradict. What now? What a puff, I offered. Cat let out a disagreeable meow. Apparently that didn't satisfy him. I had to show him that where I kept the food was completely empty. All right. Where would we keep the food? Newspaper. Can we go in the kitchen? White ice box. Aha! Right now it's empty. Door to the outside world. All right. Cat. Kitty cat. We ain't got no food. We ain't got none. I opened the icebox so the cat could see inside. Empty, I told him. The cat looked quizzically at the open door in the back of me. Sorry, fellow, there's no grub in there for me either. He stared at me with eyes as disappointed as I felt. Those big yellow eyes got to my soul. Thoughts of my family filled my head. But never mind, I don't care. At the time, they were distractions. I moved on from them. A loud meow from the cat snapped my thoughts back into the moment. I took a deep breath and grinned back at him. Guess you can scram now, I said. Nobody's going to come knocking with food for you. Ah, but somebody did knock. Open the door. It's a regrettably familiar face of Connor Green. You can tell that's his name because he's green. I stared at him. A hired hand for whomever needed the job done, but Green snitched whenever he was put in a squeeze. Working the beats, I remembered that all too well. Remarkably, the underground had been blind to it, but Green wasn't particularly assiduous. I was certain the criminal ranks would eventually plug him. He looked at me through the doorway with a coy smile. Well, ain't you going to invite me inside? Start closing the door. He stuck out a foot to stop me. Hey now, foul way to treat a customer. So that was his angle, hiring me as detective. I wondered what a bootlegger would need with a private eye, but he answered without my prompt. I'll make this quick. I can't take this to the hog house or the pigs would laugh me out, and other dicks just aren't as tempting. His grin widened. Thought this was going to be quick, I said. I started rolling a cigarette. It wasn't quick, and I'd already rolled and lighted a second smoke when Green finally finished his story. He noted the important bits in my book. It started with a letter slipped under his door in a white envelope. The envelope contained a single typewritten leaf, which he handed to me. End your game or will end you. It had no signature, instead ending with only a small scribble in the bottom right corner that resembled a black hand. Green had a lead on a new rum-running scheme. A connection from Vancouver. He'd given a sample to Tiny Paul, the gangster who ran the Tin Spoon speakeasy for mob boss Jerry Ferry. They'd agreed to buy in for more. Green's surmise letter was about his rum running. He suspected Redstone Stable, another bootlegger, of sending the letter. He told me that Stable ran a barber shop during the day and gave me the address. Green needed to know who the threat was from. He'd get Paul's gang to deal with them and continue his scheme to get rich. If I go snooping myself, folks see I'm not trusting people. No trust leads to no customers. I need to play it low-key, which is where you come in. I raised an eyebrow and stared at him through the cigarette smoke. Something in his yarn was still twisted. He must have noticed my reticence, because he said, You know, I worked closely with Lewis. I'm sure he'd want to protect me as much as any other victim. My uncle, Lewis, had put me on the force. To begin with, made me the first policewoman for the SFPD. He was the only one who'd let me walk the beats with him or do more at crime scenes than comfort a widow. He'd been obsessed with helping victims and bringing justice to those beyond salvation. After he'd taken his own life, I'd quit the SFPD. There was little more I could do there, and I started my own practice, taking his ethos to heart. Was Green worth my time? Would he be worth Lewis? Green had tipped off my uncle in a few cases. I wondered if that was enough to warrant my protection. Before I could think past my headache, he threw a bill in my lap. Keep the C note as a retainer, and don't worry about getting in touch. I'll find you later for a chat. He turned down the hallway, and I let him go. If he was willing to give me $100 with no commitment, I wouldn't stop it. Ugh, too much reading. Whew, all right. I turned back to the apartment, still confused about the whole story. My headache wasn't helping either. Whenever I lacked clarity, a trip to Southern Coffee was usually the cure. So I guess door. Mounted a gold plate on the outside that read PC Malone, Private Investigator. There's only one place I needed to go to clear my head. Southern Coffee. Southern Coffee was a basement dive. It wasn't modern, hip, or ever busy. And it was my favorite place to down some paint, especially in the company of the best bartender in the city. I grabbed a taxi cab and told the driver where I wanted to go. Thought about talking with him on our way. Let's not. Peered out the window until we arrived. Southern Coffee was an automat diner. Ethel Burgess, the lone waitress, was friendly to help with any inquiry, of course. If you winked to her right, she'd show you the way to the downstairs toilet, where Frankie played bathroom attendant. Southern Coffee had the distinct feeling of home. The familiar smell of mold in that old basement was enough to put a grin on my face. Frankie had a bond with that old shaker. All right. Grabbed the wine bottle on the bar and examined its label. It featured a picture of grapes and the words sacramental use only. Frankie looked at me with a spark in his eyes. Go ahead, give it a swig. All right. Bottoms up. I grabbed the half-empty glass that had been next to the bottle and swirled some contents between my gums. A bit spicy, ain't it? It's good, I nodded. Ugh. It'll cost you too, he said with a smile and grabbed the bottle from me, turning it through its hands. Robbie's charged more than a nickel for this beauty. Only this type of Napa wine is made from that Zinfandel grape. It has a unique aroma. I've been trying to learn more about wine. Seemed everyone knew their stuff but me. I noted what Frankie had said about the origin of the grape as he sat the bottle back on the bar. Since when do you know grapes? Some of these grapes are older than you, Malone, and I've known about them since I was a small tot. That's why I'm so good at my job, you know? Frankie sighed. Too bad more folks don't taste them. That woman's league is the devil. The Woman's Christian Temperance Union was now under feminist Frances Willard, a positive force for the suffrage of women, but her staunch support of prohibition, along with the union's massive political clout, irked the very wet San Franciscan public, and she particularly wasn't popular with bartenders. Take a seat, he said. I'll make you something else. He was a big fella. Both wide and tall, and must have been a little over 50. He had a round head, kind brown eyes, and a cropped ring of gray hair encircling an otherwise bald scalp. His voice had a warm timbre that complemented the tobacco and whiskey smells of his speakeasy. Oh, goodness. I sat at the bar. You got the spooks, PC? He asked. You're worn as catcher's mitt. I suppose my exhaustion shows. I want $100 for nothing, and I can't let it go. I told Frankie about the case, the threatening letter sent to Connor Green, how he assumed it was related to his bootlegging, and his suspicion of Redstone Stable. The story took longer than I'd wanted, Frankie showing genuine interest by asking many questions. When I finished, he threw me the whiskey sour he'd been stirring. I took a large gulp and gave a sigh as thanks. Well, Green's case is better than most of what you're given, he said with some enthusiasm. At least it's not more of that adultery bunk. Sure, I replied, but I started with a goal in mind. What's the point in helping a man like Green? Frankie clicked his tongue on his teeth. Lawyer or priest, why does it matter? Let me ask you, are the clients you have now the types you want to help? Not really. I told him that I'd wanted more from my detecting life. It could be that Green's case shoots a career forward, Malone. I sighed and stared down at my drink. But my daze was interrupted by the basement door opening, then slamming shut. The small, blustering woman began marching towards me. She looked younger than 25 and was a few inches shorter than my 5'6". I thought her gray trench coat was too large for the small frame, which was when I realized it was exactly like the one that had belonged to Lewis. She hurled insults at me a while. All I could do was sit and take it until she ran out of gas and started breathing heavily. I sat my drink on the bar, looked her in the eyes, and inserted a hello. I'm Phyllis Malone. How can I help you? Accompanied by a smile as genuine as I could muster that knocked her off balance. She stumbled over her next few words, and I added, and you are? The flame returned to her eyes between clenched teeth. She hissed, I'm the wife of that bum who sneaks into your bed. The cat? But humor wasn't her angle, and she launched into another poetic stanza. And he just left her sty this morning, she finally ended. And that's when I gathered she was Connor Green's wife. Mrs. Green, I'm a PI, not a homewrecker, and I don't think your husband in his line of business would want to bed Dick anyhow. Her look was pure incredulity. A woman in that line of work, she questioned. I don't believe it. Prove it. Green's letter. Told her about why Connor had come to me, the bootlegging and the threats. You see, Mrs. Green, this is what I do. There's not much more I can show you to prove it. It still took more coaxing for her to believe me, but eventually she came around. She seemed grateful I'd explained it to her. Apparently, she had seen her husband leave my apartment, and distraught, she had followed me all the way to Frankie's basement and decided to confront me. I suppose I lost my head after what I thought I'd seen, she said, and she began to cry. Frankie, ever chivalrous to a dimpled girl, came around the bar and held her up. Now that's all right, Mrs. Green. Why don't I hail you a cab and send you on back home? She agreed, and they walked together up the stairs. When Frankie returned, I said to him, you turned night real quick. He snorted a laugh. Oh, hell, we can't have that siren in here with a torture yelling like that. Every street bugger would have come to her rescue. Too much reading. I'm tapped out already. Plus, this is just not piquing my interest. Alright. Miss Green is a torch singer? Well, I learned she was Mrs. Connor Green just now when she came in here. I'd only seen her as Lil Franny singing lead for the jazz band at the Tin Spoon. The Tin Spoon, I said. Tiny Pole's joint? That's where Green is selling his liquor. Say, you think that's where she met her husband? You're the real sleuth, Frankie. He made a sarcastic bow. I shook my head. You're telling me you escorted our little torture out just to avoid a bit of hot water? Frankie flushed and said, what are you talking about, Malone? I was never good with emotions, but it was plain that Frankie had instantly fallen for the girl. So what if I had more to squeeze out of her, I asked. What more could you possibly want from little Fanny? She can't have anything to do with Green's mess. Contradict! Green's letter. I don't know. Obviously, the cocktail shaker. Colonel Mustard in the library with the candlestick. Alright, whatever. Oh man. Alright. We're gonna wrap this one up here. It's not doing it for me. Too much reading and random, like, I don't know, slow pace, not interesting. It's just not for me. Anyway, this was, what was this? I don't even know. A Case of Mistrust or something like that. If you like detective games and reading / talking, I guess you've got a winner here. Anyway, thank you all for watching. See you in the next one when we come back with something else.